I can't believe we have to do it this way, but here we are. I'm gonna start reading chapter one of The Outsiders. Listen, I hope you guys looked over the PowerPoint. I hope you guys looked over the characters within the book. It is something else with you guys not being here and having an audience, but that's all right. We're gonna do what we can, and the book, remember, is in the point of view of Ponyboy. So Ponyboy is gonna be telling the story. If you have the book at home, you can follow along with me. I have one of the newer editions, but I was able to pass out some of the older copies of the book. Do your best to follow along, take notes. You should have out your reader's journals with you. So if you don't have your reader's journal, get them out. And yes, you should be taking notes. It's like still being in class, except you're not here. So make sure you're taking notes. Lucy, I know you're going to impress me. Kiki, I know you're going to impress me. I'm asking for the rest of you to impress me. Have your notes out in front of you. Okay, remember you have 3 assignments that follow this chapter. All right, so here we go. Chapter 1. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had 2 things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home. I was wishing I looked like Paul Newman. He looks tough, and I don't. But I guess my own looks aren't so bad. I have light brown, almost red hair, and greenish eyes. I wish there were more gray because I hate most guys that have green eyes, but I have to be content with what I have. My hair is longer than a lot of the boys wear theirs, squared off in the back and long at the front and sides. But I'm a greaser, and most of my neighborhood rarely bothers to get haircuts. Besides, I look better with long hair. So right now you should have in your head, this young teenager boy. He just walked out of the movie theaters. Remember, Paul Newman is a famous actor from the time period of the 1960s. And I want you to imagine his hair kind of slicked back and greased up. I'm trying to think to my students would have hair kind of like that going all the way back, but just imagine that type of hairstyle. I had a long walk home and no company, but I usually loan it anyway for no reason except that I like to watch movies undisturbed so I can get into them and leave them with the actors. When I see a movie with someone, it's kind of uncomfortable, like having someone read your book over your shoulder. I'm different that way. I mean, my second oldest brother, Soda, he's 16 going on 17. Never cracks a book at all. My oldest brother, Daryl, who we call Derry, works too long and hard to be interested in a story or drawing a picture. So I'm not like them. And nobody in our gang digs movies and books the way I do. For a little while there, I thought I was the only person in the world that did. So I loaned it. So Ponyboy is a loner. You should take that as a note. He's a loner. He has 2 brothers. Derry, all right, his name is Daryl, and Soda Pop. And yes, that is Soda's real name. Soda Pop is his real name, just like Ponyboy is Ponyboy's real name, okay? Soda tries to understand at least, which is more than Derry does, but then Soda's different from anybody. He understands everything, almost. Like he's never hollering at me all the time the way Derry is, or treating me as if I was 6 instead of 14. I love Soda more than I'd ever loved anyone, even mom and dad. He's always happy-go-lucky and grinning, while Derry's hard and firm and rarely grins at all. But then, Derry's gone through a lot in his 20 years. He's growing up too fast. Soda Pop will never grow up at all. I don't know which is the best. I'll find out one of these days. All right, so hopefully we're thinking in our head about, the idea of what he means by he'll find out one of those days, but we do know that his 2 brothers are very different. Derry's like this tough, responsible person, so most of us would understand that he's probably been through a lot. And Soda is this carefree, happy-go-lucky person who's 16, almost 17, and Derry's in his 20s. We don't know about mom and dad yet, but it is important that we understand that, these boys have each other, that's for sure. So anyway, I went on walking home, thinking about the movie, and then suddenly, wishing I had some company. Greasers can't walk alone too much or they'll get jumped. Greasers can't walk alone too much or they'll get jumped. Greasers can't walk alone too much or they'll get jumped. You need that in your notes. Someone will scream, "Greaser!" And then it doesn't make you feel too hot, if you know what I mean. We get jumped by the socius. I'm not sure how you spell it, but it's abbreviation for socials, the jet set, the west side, the rich kids. It's like the term greaser, which is used to class us boys on the east side. So this is the story of East versus West. East is the poor side, that's where the greasers are. And West is that rich side where the socials are. We're poorer than the socials in the middle class. I reckon we're wilder too. Not like the socials who jump greasers and wreck houses and throw beer blasts for kicks and get editorials in the paper for being a public disgrace. One day an asset to society, the next. Greasers are almost like hoods. We steal things and drive up old souped up cars and hold up gas stations to have gang fights once in a while. I don't mean I do those things like that. Derry would kill me if I got into trouble with the police. Since mom and dad were killed in an auto wreck, the three of us get to stay together only as long as we behave. So Soda and I stay out of trouble as much as we can, and we're careful not to get caught when we can't. I only mean that most greasers do things like that. Just like we wear our hair long and dress in blue jeans and t-shirts, or leave our shirt tails out and wear leather jackets and tennis shoes or boots. I'm not saying that either socials or greasers are better. That's just the way things are. So in the mind of Ponyboy, because this is who's telling the story, we kind of learn once again that he's very confused early on. Like, he sees the differences that the society has between the East and the West, or the socials and the greasers, but it's kind of like that's just the way things are. Remember, he's walking home alone. He just got out of the movie seeing Paul Newman, and he's thinking to himself, man, I'm kind of a loner, but I'm different from everybody else. And he's wishing he had some company. I could have waited to go to the movies until Derry or Soda Pop got off work. They would have gone with me or driven me there or walked along, although Soda just can't sit still long enough to enjoy a movie, and they bore Derry to death. Derry thinks his life is enough without inspecting other people's, or I could have gotten on one of the gang to come along, one of the four boys. Derry and Soda and I have grown up with and consider family. We're almost as close as brothers. When you grow up in a tight-knit neighborhood like ours, you get to know each other real well. If I had thought about it, I could have called Derry, and he would have come by on his way home and picked me up. Or Two-Bit Matthews, one of our gang members, would have come to get to me in his car if I asked him. But sometimes I just don't use my head. It drives my brother Derry nuts when I do stuff like that, because I'm supposed to be smart. I make good grades and have a good IQ and everything, but I don't use my head. Besides, I like walking. I about decided I didn't like it so much, though, when I spotted the red Corvair trailing me. I was almost 2 blocks from home then, so I started walking a little faster. I had never been jumped, but I had seen Johnny after 4 socials got a hold of him, and it wasn't pretty. Johnny was scared of his own shadow after that. Johnny was 16 then. All right, boys and girls, so Johnny is Ponyboy's best friend, and he's recalling a time when Johnny got jumped. And now, here's Ponyboy walking alone, thinking all his thoughts. We're going to see a lot of Ponyboy's thoughts. And as he's walking, all of a sudden, he sees this red Corvair. Remember, they like to jump the greasers a lot. I knew it wasn't any use, though, the fast walking. I mean, even before the Corvair pulled up beside me and the 5 socials got out, I got pretty scared. I'm kind of small for 14, even though I have a good build and those guys were bigger than me. I automatically hitched my thumbs in my jeans and slouched, wondered if I can get away if I made a break for it. So this is what Ponyboy's doing. He's kind of like thinking to himself, do I run? Do I get out of here? I remember Johnny's face. It was all cut up and bruised. And I remember how he cried when we found him, half conscious in the corner lot. Johnny had it awfully rough at home. It took a lot to make him cry. So he's flashing back to Johnny. Now here he is. I was sweating something fierce. Although I was cold, I could feel my palms getting clammy and the perspiration running down my back and neck and face. I get like that when I'm real scared. I glanced around for a pop bottle or a stick or something. Steve Randall, Soda's best buddy, had once held up 4 guys with a busted bottle, but there was nothing. So imagine him breaking a glass bottle and then kind of holding it up like trying to defend himself. All right. So for those of you taking notes at home, you can say Steve Randall is one of Soda's best friends. So he's also a greaser. Again, this is all Ponyboy just kind of reflecting back. So I stood there like a bump on a log while they surrounded me. I don't use my head. They walked around me slowly, silently, smiling. Hey, Grease, one of them said in an over-friendly voice. You're gonna do me a favor, Greaser. We're gonna cut all that long, greasy hair off. He had on a my-dress shirt. I could still see it. It was blue. One of them laughed and then cussed me out in a low voice. I couldn't think of anything to say. There just isn't a whole lot you can say while you're waiting to get mugged. So I kept my mouth shut. Need a haircut, Greaser? The medium-sized blonde pulled a knife out of his back pocket and flipped the blade open. I finally thought of something to say. No, I was backing up from that knife. Of course, I backed right into one of them. They held me down for a second. They had my arms and legs pinned down, and one of them was sitting on my chest with his knees on my elbows. And if you don't think that hurts, you're crazy. I could smell the English leather shaving lotion and the stale tobacco, and I wondered foolishly if I would suffocate before they did anything. I was scared, so bad I was wishing I would. I fought to get loose and almost did for a second. Then they tightened up on me, and one of them on my chest slugged me a couple times. So I lay still, swearing at them between gasps, "You guys are..." Then a blade was held against my throat. How'd you like that haircut to begin just below the chin, huh, Greaser? It occurred to me then that they could kill me. I went wild. I started screaming for soda. Soda! Dairy, anyone! Someone put his hand over my mouth, and I bit it hard as I could, tasting the blood running through my teeth. I heard a muttered curse, and then I got slugged again. And there they were, stuffing a handkerchief in my mouth. And one of them kept saying, "Shut him up, for Pete's sake, shut him up!" Then there were shouts and the pounding of feet. The soldiers jumped up and left me lying there, gasping. I lay there and wondered what in the world was happening. People were jumping over me and running by me, and I was too dazed to figure it out. Then someone had me under their armpits and was holding me to my feet. It was Derry. "You all right, pony boy?" He was shaking me, and I wish he'd stop. I was dizzy enough anyway. I could tell it was Derry, though, partly because of his voice and partly because Derry's always rough with me without questioning me. "I'm okay. Quit shaking me, Derry. I'm okay." He stopped instantly. "I'm sorry." He wasn't really. Derry isn't ever sorry for anything he does. It seems funny to me that he should look just exactly like my father and act exactly the opposite of him. My father was only 40 when he died, and he looked 25. And a lot of people thought Derry and Dad were brothers instead of father and son, but they only looked alike. My father was never rough with anyone without meaning to be. Wow, you see how spiteful Pony Boy is? You probably need this for your notes. He just does not like Derry. He thinks Derry is very rough to him and very mean to him. And here's how they describe Derry. Derry is 6'2" and broad shoulders and muscular. He has dark brown hair that kicks out in front and a slight cowlick in the back, just like Dad's. But Derry's eyes are his own. He's got those eyes like two pieces of pale blue-green ice. They've got a determined set to them, like the rest of him. He looks older than 20, tough, cool, and smart. He would be real handsome if his eyes weren't so cold. He doesn't understand anything that is not plain hard fact, but he uses his head. I sat down again, rubbing my cheek where I had been slugged the most. Derry jammed his fists into his pockets. "They didn't hurt you too bad, did they? Did they?" They did. I was smarting off and aching, and my chest was soaring, and I was nervous. My hands were shaking. I wanted to start bawling like a baby. But you just don't do that to Derry. So I responded, "I'm okay." Soda Pop came looping back, and then I figured that all that noise I had heard was the gang coming to rescue me. He dropped down beside me and examined my head. You got cut up little, huh? Huh, Pony Boy?" I only looked up at him blankly. I did? He pulled out a handkerchief, and he wet it with his tongue. He pressed it gently against the side of my head. "You're bleeding like a stuck pig." "I am? Look." He showed me the handkerchief, reddened by magic. "Did he pull the blade on you? Huh?" I remembered the voice. "Need a haircut, Greaser?" The blade must have slipped while he was trying to shut me up. "Yeah." So look how Soda is very protective of Pony Boy. He kind of comes in with this loving attitude, almost like this mother figure, if you will, who can take care of him. Meanwhile, Derry was kind of shaking him up, and maybe not on purpose, but that's what Pony Boy kind of felt like. But notice the difference between how Pony sees Soda and Derry right away, even though both of the brothers in the gang just came to save him. Here's how he describes Soda. Soda is handsome than anyone else I know. Not like Derry. Soda is a movie star kind of handsome, the kind that people stop on the street to watch go by. He's not as tall as Derry, and he's a little slimmer, but he's got a finely drawn, sensitive face that somehow managed to be reckless and thoughtful at the same time. He's got dark gold hair that he combs back in long, silky and straight, and in the summer the sun bleaches it to a shining wheat gold. His eyes are dark brown, lively, dancing, recklessly laughing eyes that can be gentle and sympathetic in one moment and blazing with anger the next. He has dad's eyes, but Soda's one of a kind. He can get drunk in a drag race or dance without ever getting near alcohol. In our neighborhood, it's rare to find a kid who doesn't drink once in a while, but Soda never touches a drop. He doesn't need to. He gets drunk on just plain living, and he understands everybody. So there's a difference. Soda does not drink. He's not into that kind of stuff. He's just a very happy-go-lucky guy, as we described earlier. He looked at me more closely. I looked away hurriedly, because if you want to know the truth, I was starting to bawl. I knew I was white as I felt, and I was shaking like a leaf. Soda put his hand on my shoulder. Easy, Pony Boy. They ain't gonna hurt you no more. We got you. I know, I said, but the ground began to blur, and I felt hot tears running down my cheeks. I brushed them away impatiently. I'm just a little spooked, that's all. I drew a quivering breath and quit crying. You just don't cry in front of Derry, not unless you're hurt like Johnny had been that day we found him in the vacant lot. Compared to Johnny, I wasn't close to being hurt. Soda rubbed my hair. You're okay, kid. You're good, Pony. I had to grin at him. Soda can make you grin no matter what. I guess it's because he's always grinning so much himself. You're crazy, Soda. You're out of your mind. Derry looked as if he was about to knock our heads together. You both are nuts. Soda merely cocked one eyebrow. He picked up from Two-Bit. It seems to run in the family, huh? Derry stared at him for a second, and then he cracked a grin. Soda isn't afraid of him like everyone else is. I'd just as soon tease a full-grown grizzly bear before some reason. Derry seems to like being teased by Soda. So here's their kind of gang, and here's what they are kind of into, and protecting each other and loving each other. And Soda, he just doesn't have this fear of Daryl like everyone else does. He's a kidder. He jokes around. Next, here on page 9, we meet Steve Randall, who is one of the gang members as well. So we go from almost being jumped to being saved by the gang, and now here's Steve Randall. So if you're taking notes or using your character chart, he's part of the gang as well. Now he's 17, tall and lean with thick greasy hair and kept combed and a complicated swirls. He was cocky and smart, and so does best buddy since grade school. Steve's specialty was cars. He could fix a hubcap quicker and quieter than anyone in the neighborhood. All right, so Soda and Steve, these two guys get into a lot of trouble, but Soda always kind of protects Pony and kind of brings him along for the ride. So then scrolling down to page 9, you have Two-Bit Matthews. He was the oldest of the gang and the wisecracker of the bunch. He was about 6 feet tall, stocky in build, and very proud of his long, rusty-colored sideburns. He had gray eyes and a wide grin, and he couldn't stop making funny remarks to save his life. So Two-Bits is a joker, and that's his nickname, Two-Bits Matthews, because he's always got to get his 2 bits in, hence his name. Even though his teachers forgot his real name was Keith, he had to hardly remember he had one. Life was one big joke to Two-Bit. He was famous for shoplifting and his black-handled switchblade, which he couldn't have acquired without his first talent. He was always smarting off to the cops and always getting in trouble. He liked fights and he liked blondes and all the things I couldn't fathom for some reasons. So there's Two-Bit. He's a joker. He's kind of crazy. Kind of going down the page, we have Dallas Winston, who's next, a.k.a. Dally. If you had to pick one character of the gang, it would be Dallas Winston, a.k.a. Dally. I used to like to draw his picture when he was in a dangerous mood, for when I could get his personality down to the few lines. He had an elfish face with high cheekbones and pointed chin, small, sharp animal teeth, and ears like a lynx. His hair was almost white as blonde, and he didn't like haircuts or hair oil either. His eyes were blue, blazing ice cold with hatred of the world. Dally had spent 3 years on the wild side of New York and had been arrested at the age of 10. He was tougher than the rest of us, tougher, colder and meaner. Please make sure you have that in your notes. Dally is cold to the world, okay? He is very, very angry and does not like the world, all right? And so finally, they talk about Tim Shepard and his gang. He's a separate gang from the Greasers, but he does have his gang as well. And last but not least, on page 11, going down at the bottom to the final paragraph, we meet Johnny Cade. If you can picture a little dark puppy that has been kicked too many times and is lost in a crowd of strangers, you'll have Johnny. He was the youngest next to me, smaller than the rest with a slight build. He had big black eyes and dark tan face. His hair was jet blacked and heavily greased and combed to the side, but it was so long that it fell shaggy bangs across his forehead. He was a nervous, suspicious look in his eyes, and he had that beating. The beating he took from the Soch didn't help matters. He was the gang's pet, everyone's kid brother. His father was always beating him up, and his mother ignored him, except when she hacked off at him or something. And then you could hear her yelling clear down the block. I think he hated that the worst, getting whipped. He would have run away a million times if we hadn't been there. If he hadn't been for the gang, Johnny would never have known what love and affection are. I wiped my eyes hurriedly. Did you catch him? Nope. They got away this time, the dirty two-bit son of a bitch. Two-bit went on, almost cursing and screaming. The kid's okay? I'm okay. I tried to think of something to say. I'm usually pretty quiet around people, even the gang. I changed the subject. I don't know how we're out of the cooler yet, Dally. Or how'd you get out of the cooler yet, Dally? Good behavior. I got off early. Dallas lit a cigarette and handed it to Johnny. Everyone sat down and had a smoke to relax. A smoke always lessens the tension. I had quit trembling and my color was back. The cigarette was calming down. Two-bit cocked an eyebrow. Nice looking bruise you got there, kid. I touched my cheekbone gingerly. Really? Two-bit nodded sagely. Nice cut, too. Makes you look tough. Tough and tough are two different words. Tough is the same as rough, but tough means cool and sharp, like a tough-looking Mustang or tough record in our neighborhood. Both were compliments. So the gang has kind of rescued him. Ponyboy kind of goes through and tells us who all the gang members are of the Greasers, and they kind of like help him through this. Now, I'm going to be breaking this book down not just by the chapters, but by certain parts. So I'm actually going to stop there for now. So we're on page 12 in the new book. And then I'm going to kind of pick up because it's going to kind of talk about what takes place next in this chapter. There's only a couple pages left within chapter 1, but I just want to stop there and kind of go over the notes one more time so that we have them, okay? So we have Ponyboy. He walks out of a movie. He's by himself. He's a greaser. They get jumped, or he gets jumped by some of the socialists. Remember the socialists from the west side, and in comes the gang to kind of save him. They do that, and it turns out to be a great thing. But Ponyboy is kind of like in this real interesting place where he doesn't really like Derry, even though Derry's older brother, but he loves soda. Their parents were killed in a car wreck, as it kind of mentioned, so they kind of have to take care of him. Now the boys kind of pick him up, and they're going to kind of take him up to the movies to kind of get their minds off things. One kind of important thing you need to know, too, is that Soda is one of those characters who we're going to see a lot in the book, who's very loving and caring, and he doesn't have time or the patience for any of the crazy stuff. He loves his girl. His girl's name is Sandy, so you can put that in your notes. It will come up later, but it's not the most important thing you need to know. And Soda also works at the DX, which is like a gas station store. All right, so that's kind of where we all are with this right now. Johnny and Ponyboy are really good friends, and they're going to kind of come back and talk to each other within the chapter. And they all get home, and then Soda and Ponyboy are kind of having a conversation about love. And this is kind of where the chapter ends. The only reason why I'm kind of bypassing those parts are because they're not as important and it gets kind of lengthy. But I do want you to hear this last part. Soda and Ponyboy are kind of having a talk at home, and he kind of asked him, Ponyboy asked him, "Are you in love with Sandy? And what's it like?" He sighed happily. "It's real nice." In the moment, he was breathing was light and regular. I turned my head to look at him in the moonlight. He looked like a Greek god coming to earth. I wondered how he could stand being so handsome, and then I sighed. I don't quite get what he meant about Derry. Derry thought I was just another mouth to feed or somebody to holler at. Derry love me? Nah. Because Soda was trying to remind him that, Derry does love you, but obviously Ponyboy doesn't believe that. Derry doesn't love anyone or anything except maybe Soda. I didn't hardly think of him being a human. I don't care, I lied to myself. I don't care about him either. Soda's enough, and I'll have him until I get out of school. I don't care about Derry, but I was still lying, and I knew it. I lie to myself all the time, but I never believe me. So, a couple things you should have for your notes is that Ponyboy, one of the youngest in the group, him and Johnny are good friends. Ponyboy loves his two brothers, except for Derry, who's kind of tough on him. Tomorrow, we'll get a chance to kind of see what takes place with that. So now what you have to think of, and I know today was a little bit longer because there's a lot of introduction, a lot of reading, but now what you have to think of is how do you summarize this, right, based off the notes you took? How do you come up with a chapter name for this? What would you name this chapter? And then finally, what are 3 questions that you could come up with that you would have? You're going to place all those inside the Google Classroom. And then tomorrow, I will upload chapter 2 from my home, most likely. And we'll take it from there. If you have any questions, you can email me. But right now, just kind of know that as we go through the book, we're taking definitely some parts and bits from it, and we will take it from there. All right? So make sure you have those notes. If you have anything, email me, and we'll take it from there, guys. Thank you.